Welcome to the Crossover Chronicles podcast, where we talk shop about everything basketball, from the old days in the driveway to now being on the sidelines. We hope the discussions with our guests spark ideas and help broaden your knowledge of the game. As always, thank you for listening and please subscribe. Welcome to the Crossover Chronicles podcast. I'm Cole Smith. I'm here with our special guest, Rusty Grafel. Rusty is currently at Fort Hays State University. Rusty's been he was my head coach at Colby Community College, was there for quite a few years. I think it was like 6 or 7, and then ended up going down to Texas Tech University, and then spent the last couple of years down at Georgia Southern before now accepting the job back at Fort Hays, kind of getting closer to home. So, Coach Grafel, if you want to go ahead and just start giving an introduction to the audience for me.
Absolutely, yeah. Cole, thanks for having me on here. I haven't done too many of these. It's been kind of like I told you, it's been a while since I've been on Zoom, as you could see with my age of trying to get my volume turned on and camera on. It's been off since COVID, but I feel fortunate to be on here with you. I'm honored to be able to share some stuff with you. And you kind of hit it on the head, I guess, with kind of my background. As far as the coaching part goes, you almost got it exactly right. You got the head coaching part right. I was at Colby for 10 years. 3 as an assistant right when I got out of grad school, and then moved on to 7 when I was bumped up to the head coach for a total of 10. Right after that, I went to Texas Tech with Chris Beard and his staff, and I was actually only there 9 months, and then COVID hit the rest of the world. So I was fortunate enough after that to then follow Brian Berg, who I knew at Texas Tech, kind of one of the reasons I went down there. And we went to Georgia Southern, where I was the last 3 years. And then fortunate enough, again, kind of like the coaching world works, it seems like it's a carousel. And Coach Johnson, who I was a grad assistant for and then also played for, gave me a call and offered me a job, and seemed right for timing and everything like that. So I headed back to Kansas, to home, and here I am. And it doesn't feel like I told you before we get on, it doesn't feel like I've been here very long, even though I've been here already 2 months. But it's been good so far.
Yeah. So, where you grew up in Oberlin, is that right? Is that where you went to high school?
Yeah, so even go further back, yeah. So I'm a Northwest Kansas guy originally. Graduated from Oberlin High School. After that, I was able to play at Hutchinson Community College, and then from there, I went to Fort Hays State, and I played my remaining years before I was a grad assistant. So Kansas, born and bred, kind of lived all over Kansas, even my younger days, from Garden City to Wamego, Kansas, and obviously Oberlin. But all families here for the most part too. So this is for sure home, for sure home.
Yeah. Yeah, I said it on when I did my last episode with Xavier.
Oh
Um
yeah, yeah,
yeah, with Xavier. So I remember if you remember it was like right after I signed, we finally realized that my mom babysat you when you were little and you guys lived in Garden City.
yep.
And I remember that I was like, we didn't even realize it till after I signed all this other stuff. I was like, it's just kind of cool how, it just shows how small the world is. Like, I didn't know Rusty Groffel from, anywhere. And then I signed with him, and then come to find out
Yeah,
my mom was his babysitter growing up. So it was kind of cool.
not nuts. And you hear that as you keep getting older, and as you know
Yeah.
too, you family now, and some stuff will probably start to get broader as far as just little things that all of a sudden you're like, wow, that, geez, my mom might have said that, or somebody might have said that, because
Yeah.
I'm not more. But even to like even put it in a more full circle, like your mom babysitting me. I mean, Mikey's your coach, and he's
Yeah.
from. There's all these weird ties that you kind of look back and like, wow, maybe things probably do happen for a reason in a weird way. I mean, that's
Yeah.
does, and it's funny how it all evolves. In everything, and especially when it's good when it comes to sports and stuff that you're really into, and it involves your life. So pretty
Yeah.
crazy though. That one took me back right there.
Yeah.
I forgot about that, but obviously completely remember that conversation with your mom too when it happened. So
Yeah. Yeah. So when did growing up, I'm guessing you and Egan were obviously multi-sport athletes, but what made you fall in love with basketball?
yeah, and you can attest to this too. Being from a small town in Oberlin, at the time, all the way through my senior year, we were 3A, so we were actually bigger than what they were now. They've kind of gotten smaller, like a lot of these towns in Kansas, through the years. But I was always, Dad was a football coach. He was a basketball coach. He was a track coach. He kind of involved himself in everything. So it really involved all us young ones in everything. And anytime you hear a coach's kid, it seems like part of being a coach's kid is when you can't have a babysitter, you go with dad or mom to practice. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. So you're around all the sports. And I would say first and foremost, that's what really got me involved, obviously, because I was just there and I was always wanting to do something. And then, when I had Egan, who was 2 years younger than me, we had Taryn, who was 2 years younger than him, so we're all kind of relatively close as far as the first three of us. So it seemed like we were always, if we're there, we're doing something. We're getting older, we're doing something, we're going to end up we're playing together when we're in high school. So um, I was fortunate that I gravitated and I liked all the sports. And, today's kids and young men and women, they kind of gravitate to where they isolate themselves in the sport more, which rightfully so. But I like personally, this is getting maybe ahead of myself, but I like recruiting multi-sport kids.
Yeah.
And I just liked it myself at that age because I was able to do just multiple different things, but then figure out kind of what I liked the best, which then I made a decision when that time came, my senior year of what I really wanted to do. And that's not easy for a kid, I would say, but I'm lucky enough that my parents and where I was probably at allowed me to do that.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing for, like, I know, like us, like going into the inner city and stuff like that, me playing AU ball and like all the guys that we met, they like look at us small town kids like we're crazy because we played every sport. It's like, man,
Yeah.
there wasn't nothing else to do. I mean, there really
Yeah.
wasn't. Um, it was I either played this sport or I sat at home and was a bookworm, and that wasn't my style. So,
Yeah.
that's the big thing with a lot of these small town kids. And I try to preach, like, in my program is like, I don't want kids that just want to play basketball. Like, I expect you guys to do a fall sport or be involved in some way.
Yeah.
I think last year, we had 19 kids on the team total. And I had, out of 19, only two of them were not involved in a fall sport in some way. And so, like, I tell them, hey, if you don't want to play football, go be the manager. Like, go hang out with your boys. If you don't want to do football, you don't want to be the manager, go run cross country, do something. Like, it's a bigger picture thing. And we had a great football season last year that led into it, but you could just tell how much easier it was for those guys to blend. And we get a lot of foreign exchange students here too. So it's easier for those guys to blend when they've been in seasons together rather than, well, I'm coming here, I'm a foreign exchange student, all I do is play basketball, or, oh, I'm just here to run track. No, like, go play, go do something. So
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. And I think one of the other things too, there's an art to it. Even at a young age. And I think you take that art with you. If you're a multi-sport athlete in high school, doesn't matter what level, from 1A to 6A to 8A, wherever you're from, there's an art to that, how you learn different things from different sport, how it helps you in other sports, and how it helps you probably in the sport that you're going to play the rest of your life, if that's what you're going to do. And not to take anything away from the athlete that just isolates himself and plays that one sport, because to be honest with you, and you could probably vouch for this too, if one of us would have focused completely on basketball and had all the tools to bigger
yeah,
city or whatever, I mean, you're probably going to be a better basketball player. That's a given.
yeah,
And so that's an art in itself too. But I think there's something to it. You could use multiple different adjectives and words, whether it's grit, whether it's, just different things that you can take with you, even outside of the sport. I mean, it just teaches you, and that's part of coaching. That's
yeah.
part of sport. That's part of the learning aspect, which is huge in today's age, especially since I think there's not as many multi-sport athletes, to be honest with you. So it kind of takes away from part of it, but at the same time, you're still getting an athlete. So
Yeah, and that's something, like, I even tell the guys, like Paulo Banchero, like, generational basketball talent, was a very, very highly recruited football player as well. Jalen Suggs, lottery pick,
mm-hmm.
was the Gatorade National or Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Wisconsin for football. Avery Johnson plays football at K-State now. You ever got
Yeah,
to watch him live in person? He was a great basketball player. And there's just a lot of other guys. We had Jet Vincent from our level, from Canton Galva, that played for Coach O. that he's going to play, he's going to play football at Colorado State. He was an all-state basketball player all 3 years. And
Yeah.
then was the final leg of their state championship team this year for their 4x1. Like, that kid had every, I don't think I wouldn't have been mad if I was his coach if he came to me and, hey man, I signed to Colorado State. I'm going to go play football. I want to just stay in the weight room. I don't want to play basketball. I'm trying to enroll early. Like, I would have been cool with that. Like,
Yeah.
but, like that kid stayed true to himself. He wanted to keep playing. But I just tell him all the time, like everybody's past different. There's some kid, like Chet Holmgren. You probably don't want to put that guy on a football field. You just don't. Like so he probably just needs to stay in the gym and play basketball. Willie Cauley-Stein playing with Coach with Carson, like in high school and growing up. He played football. John Calipari never watched him play a basketball game.
Yeah.
He only ever watched him play a football game, and he went to Kentucky. So I try to tell him, like, it's all cool to specialize, but you got to be super committed and have all that. I've been here for 6 years, and we've only ever had one kid that has said, "Oh, I'm not playing football just because I want to focus on basketball." We've had one, and that was Ethan Hildebrand, and he now plays at Emporia State under Coach Doty. He didn't play football his senior year. He went out and averaged 26 a game his freshman year, or his senior year. Averaged like 26 and 13. But he was in the gym every single day. When everybody else was at football practice, he was in the gym on the gun. And I just tell him, like, that's a rare breed, man. Some of you guys just, I can tell you don't have it, man. You got to stay committed. So
No, you're exactly right. You're right.
yeah. So getting into coaching, I mean, who was your biggest influence? I know obviously your dad, but I mean, along the way, who's helped you out?
Yeah, for sure, my dad. And he kind of did it. I don't know, like a lot of parents probably, influence you. He wasn't influencing me necessarily to be a coach, but he was with how he was doing things. So it's kind of funny how it all comes back around. And I was able to coach. Egan coached obviously with me, in all these different aspects when you look back at it as a young man. But along the road outside of my pops, Dick Alberg, who was the head coach of the high school team that I played for at the time. And he stayed with me. I just saw him for Egan's wedding, actually. So, I mean, we talk and communicate. And now that I'm back in Kansas, he'll be able to come to games. But he was alongside with my dad, and they did a heck of a job from when I was young all the way till, now, as far as they're those type of guys that keep their coaching within their parenting. They keep their coaching kind of around them. So it's easy to, when I talk to him, to navigate back to me sitting in the locker room, because it feels like he's telling me something. So really good coach, really taught me a lot. And then, through my years up to where I'm at now, I thought potentially you might ask me this question. So I was kind of thinking about it before we even got on this call. And a lot of coaches, and I would probably say they would say this, they take with them like what they had previously or what they played, who they played for. So that's what I've done. I've taken a lot of stuff from Chad Wentz, who was at Hutchinson Community College, who I played for, Mark Johnson, who I played for, then was a grad and now working for, Dustin Pfeiffer. And then you go down the line of Chris Beard and Brian Berg. And there's little bits and pieces, but some of it sticks with me more, when it comes to Mark Johnson and Chad Wentz, and even Dustin, because that was early in my coaching career, and playing career, obviously. So a lot of that stuff I am taking with me, and sometimes I don't even know. Like, I'm almost thinking it's mine, but really it's not. It's I learned it, and I've probably adapted it with my philosophy and tweaked it a little bit. But really, those guys have always stayed close to me. There's a reason why I'm back at Fort Hays with Coach Johnson. He's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. At one point, he will be. And then Dustin is here in Hayes. Ironically, he's assistant for Hayes High. So he stayed in coaching. So those guys are big influences on me, whether it's just, me calling them and just talking outside of basketball, or actually we're talking basketball, obviously, which helps, any coach, and a lot of coaches, young or old, that have those guys they can, lean on and talk to.
Yeah. I mean, I was the same way. I mean, when I first got the job here, like I was 2 years out. I hadn't been in a gym, hadn't coached, hadn't done nothing for 2 years when I took over being the head. And I was like, okay, I gotta figure out what I want to do. And so like our defensive system is what we ran at Colby.
Yeah.
99% of it, and few tweaks and changes just because the type of kids I got, but it's what we ran at Colby. And I'll tell you this, I'm way better at teaching it than I was understanding it 100%. So
That's better. That's actually probably a better thing, to be honest with you. So
yeah,
that
like
means,
I'm better at teaching it than I am when I ever was playing it and understanding it that way. But so we've like I've taken that, I've taken things from Mikey. I had 4 coaches in 4 years in high school. Um, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them okay. But there's still some things that I took from them, even though they were bad or not, whatever. But you just
yeah,
you pull everything, I think, from everybody. And I think coaching now is just such a copycat. I mean, it is a copycat system from
yeah,
all across the board. There's only so many things you can do, but everybody just kind of tweaks it just a little bit. And it might make sense to somebody that, I might be here in Kansas and somebody come and watch a game about the way we play defense, and they might be from California and they haven't seen something done like that before. And then they're going to take what I go back out there. And then now, oh, that's something new and fresh that they're doing. And it's really is just kind of a copycat all over the place.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I think as I keep, as long as I can stay around this business, it's already been like 16 years, which is crazy to say, but, with it being a copycat, obviously you're always doing something probably been known in the game at some point. I think the biggest thing is the message, the like how you're doing it. And that's probably the one thing I've learned, being around some other guys too, is it doesn't matter if you're doing a shell drill that everybody in the country does. How are you influencing the shell drill? How are you getting these guys to do exactly what you want on day 2 and day 45? And then still trying to get more out of them, or trying to get better at this one situation or one part of it. So that's the interesting part to me about, we can all do the same thing, but at the end of the day, the really good teams and probably the really good coach teams play how their coach is coaching. That's what I've always known. Like if you can get your guys to, whatever type of coach you are, to play the way you're trying to coach them, then you're doing your job. You're influencing them in the way that you want to, and then you just got to figure out the other parts of the wins and losses, or what it may be. So that's the interesting part to me, is the message part. And I've had some good ones over the years. And Chris Beard's one of the best that I've ever seen. I
Yeah.
mean, just as far as the message from day 1 to day 70,000. I mean, that's why he's really good in my opinion. He's good. He's a good basketball coach. And he's good at a lot of things, but motivation and just the message to the guys. I mean, it got me going as a staff member to try to run through the wall. I was like, geez, every day I'm just like getting amped up. My heart's racing. I'm like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So all those things, like you're saying, young coach, old coach, doesn't matter. As long as you can give them something where they can keep, getting better, and it's obviously helping the team, I think, you're doing what you're supposed to, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So transition into that, since you talked about young coach, you were kind of a young one yourself. I think you're probably about my age when you got your first sorry. When you got your first head coaching gig at Colby. So because I'm 26 now, so I thought you're probably, I can't remember how old you were when you got it, but what was that, transition of going from being an assistant for, you were at Fort Hays as a grad and then being the assistant at Colby and then taking over that program. And then, it was in a dark place. I mean, and then you had to kind of bring it up and bring it out and brought it to some prominence and stuff like that. So what was that pressure like as a young coach, being at having to coach in the Jayhawk, honestly?
Yeah, first it was a dream come true. I would have never have thought, and I believe I was 27, 28, right in there. So about, you hit it on the head, or about right around the same age as you. And completely out of left field. Um, I came over after Fort Hays, and so Dustin Pfeiffer was the grad assistant at Fort Hays. That's kind of how that happened. He's from Colby, so we knew each other. There was a little bit more of a relationship there. But he helped coach me at Hays, and then ended up getting the head job here, excuse me, at Colby. And then I was done, and we had a tie, and so I jumped on board with him, and got done with year 3, and I was fortunate enough with Dustin to see that program at that point from the ground up. Osterman had it going when you were really young. When I was in
Yeah.
high school, they were winning, and then there was a couple coaching changes there where it just kind of fell off. And so Dustin came in as a hometown kid where they won a state title. His name was relevant and everybody was excited. And we got it. The first year was really rough. We won 5 games. Second year we bumped it up to like 14 or 15, and then I think the last year we won like 19, somewhere around 19 or 20. So we had it going where probably quicker than what anybody thought, in year 3. And then it just happened to where literally I'm thinking about maybe I'm going to, try to move a job, to try to bounce around in coaching. Finish my 3rd year. We're getting better. My resume looks a little bit okay. And, I'm in the dorms in the Old North, and
Yep.
I'm staying there because that's part of my getting paid. I'm an RA, and I'm doing that whole deal. And literally August, 13th, somewhere right around there, Dustin brought me over for a meal with his family, and just literally got like 2 minutes in the middle. He's like, "Hey, you're going to be the head coach next year." And I kind of looked at him and I was like, "All right." I was like, "Good. Okay, what's the next joke?" And so he's, "No, I'm serious. I'm putting in my letter of resignation, and I want you to be the guy. I don't know if you're going to be hired as the guy, but I'm hoping what we're doing here is going to help that." So that part, well, I was really fortunate, and it hit me really quick because school started on like August 19th. So 6 days away. All the guys were there because we recruited them. So it was a dream come true, Cole. Being from Northwest Kansas, I didn't think it would happen that quick in my career. So I guess if there was a good thing, school started in less than a week. So I really was already focused as an assistant on what I was going to be needing to do with the team. And I was able to just kind of keep that focus going forward and just changing my position, and obviously changing how much I talked,
Yeah.
which was the biggest thing I had to. The one lucky thing I had is Egan was already there. So Egan was planning on being an assistant on our staff, regardless, with, me as an assistant too. So then he was then elevated to my only assistant at the time. But it was a whole lot of learning on the go. As a young coach, maybe you can vouch for this, but I'm sure a lot of young coaches can. You think exactly what you want to do. You think, you're ready for it. You've always been wanting to do it, since the point you decided you wanted to be a coach. And then when that moment happens, and you start going through practice, just different phases of the collegiate part of, putting down your philosophy, getting everything in front of the guys, making sure they understand you're doing right, so they're doing right. Like, all of it is under a microscope, and it gets hard because then there's holes, there's these things you didn't think would happen. And then you're defending your culture, you're defending everything that you're trying to do. And it was a lot easier before you got put in that seat. So that's what I give props to a lot of any coach, to be honest with you, is defending your culture, being able to, bring that every day. And not every coach can. And, whether or not they win or lose, I don't know. That'd be a statistic to look at. But I would go ahead and say, if you don't defend your culture and there's stuff that you're not all the way bought in on it, you're probably not winning a lot of games, because it usually doesn't work like that in any sport. So, I was just fortunate, and deer in the headlights. Our first year was rough, but I learned as much as I could while I was on the go. That kind of helped me. It helped that I had a brother there that was also an assistant coach, and it helped that I had a group of people around me that boosters that knew me, people that knew me in the community, and then the players that I helped recruit, as well as the returners that were back, that knew, okay, we're ready. Like, we've heard him before. We've been a part of, at least, been on the phone, or he's watched us, so there was some buy-in there that I didn't have to worry about of just showing up and, hey, I'm the guy. So it was a lot, though. It was a lot. I would replay it if I could, even if I couldn't change it, just to kind of watch myself and see how much maybe I've changed up to that point. But I'm sure I've changed a lot, as a young man to even an older man right now, as far as the coaching aspect, hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, that was the same way, man. I was always, I think when I decided to call it quits and called and talked to you about it all, and and I just told you, I was like, man, I don't want to, I don't feel like playing no more, and I feel like I want to coach, I want to go out and do these things. And that first year as an assistant was really easy. And then, I feel like maybe the transition would have been a little bit smoother if I wasn't out of it for 2 years. But I can tell you that first year, man, we started 0-10, losing every game by 30. Not even close. I mean, it was just bad. And I was trying to figure out, I was changing so much stuff I didn't know. And I was just like, there was at one point I literally told my fiance, I was like, man, do I even know like how to coach? Like, I don't know what I'm like. I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah.
and and then I'd talk to my brother, and my brother's like, you just got to keep your head up. Talk to Mikey, and Mikey's like, look, man, it's a lot different, being 6 inches over, whatever. Just stay consistent, and it'll work out. You know what you're doing. Don't freak out and all that stuff. And it worked out. We started 0-10, finished 5-5 the last 10 games, but and lost to some really good teams in those 5 games. But it's that's the biggest thing is I tell a lot of guys is I never got the chance to be an assistant. Like I got 1 year. It was I mean, you may think I'm crazy, but it was probably more hectic than my couple years in Colby as far as things that were going on. It was not fun. Um,
Yeah.
Getting pulled in so many different directions. You get pulled by parents, you're getting pulled by the head coach. You're trying to, have the kids' back, you're trying to have the coaches back, you're trying to have the parents back, and it was awful. Um, and so I just tell all these guys now that I've coached or want to get into coaching or friends and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, be an assistant for as long as you can. Like, be picky. Like, don't do what I did. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not fun. And I said, it doesn't matter if it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, there's so much to be learned being an assistant. Because when you get in that head role, it's completely different because everything's on you.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything's on you. So
No, you're right. Yeah, it's a whole different ball game when you're in that head seat, even though it's really just one seat over, if that makes sense.
yeah.
That's the part about it. It's one seat over, but that one seat is, yeah, you're the captain, you're the driver, you're the, hey,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to you or it's going up with you. So,
Yeah.
there's obviously a lot of good in it, obviously, that we both know, but at the same time, there's also a lot of anxiety and stress, like there isn't any job, but hey,
Yeah.
do it. It's a crazy business. You do it. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It's a crazy business, and you do it for a good reason. That's why.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of morph these two questions. So you obviously went from Colby and then went down to Texas Tech. And so now, like, what is your daily life? I mean, what was the transition like from going to Colby, going to Texas Tech? And then what was your like daily duties when you're at Texas Tech, when you're at Georgia Southern, now being at Hayes? I mean, what was your that transition like, and what was your daily duties that you had to do? What's all that stuff?
Yeah. So the transition, being at Colby, and as you know, with the position you're in, when I was a head coach, being your own boss is just a whole different thing. It's awesome. Doesn't matter what your job is, but especially in the coaching world, being a head coach and being able to say when you're having practice, say what we're doing, obviously having your assistants and everybody there along with you to help you, put all that together. But that was the one transition that was the toughest, and I knew it was going to be. Just I was a head coach for 7 years. I was out in Northwest Kansas for a total of 10 as far as the coaching part of it goes. So the life and the change of speed from going to Colby to Lubbock was quite drastic. I mean, there's more to do down there. There's more people. The speed of life is going faster down there. So that those pieces right there were pretty difficult. And literally, when I decided I was going to resign, and I had about a month, maybe a month and a half, where I couldn't go to Tech. I had to stay in Colby and kind of get things ready for them and help them out as far as the transition with a new coach before I could get down to Tech in June. Um, I was able to honestly, I made up my mind, obviously, but I was able to mentally prepare myself, which I had to do. Like I knew based off of going down there 2 or 3 times in the past, 2 years, like what they do on a daily basis. and it was different. It was just more hours. I mean, I knew that, which I didn't think was going to be a big deal because it was basketball, you know. So for me, that's what we do up, you know, in Colby or wherever else. It's just we kind of minimized, you know, what we were doing, because we were doing a lot of different things sometimes besides basketball. It didn't matter if you had another job or assistant editor, you know. So we were just doing different things opposed to just basketball. You know, so getting down there and just, you know, the high major in, you know, high level Division I schools, it's just a beast is the best way to put it. Like, unless you work there, it's hard to understand a day-to-day operation, and every coach does it different. And obviously money and level, you know, obviously allows you to do some different things. But, you know, Chris Beard is known for being a workhorse. I mean, that's just what he's known for. So, you know, we would, you know, on a day like Colby, you know, we maybe get in the office at, depending on if we had workouts preseason wise or not, we'd probably get in there before like 7:45, you know, and doing class checks, you know, stuff like that, walking around, and then being there and having practice sometimes in the evenings. Preseason, we had it kind of, you know, all over the place depending on the gym space. So we had a lot of a full day, it seemed like, but there's always bits and pieces in there where you're going to lunch, you're talking to people, you're not doing basketball, right? So then you transition to Texas Tech, and you're in there probably at the latest at 8 a.m. and probably on average, you're not leaving till 2 in the morning. And when I say not leaving, you're not leaving. Like you're eating there, you're doing your workouts there, you're doing your film there, you're flipping around, you're doing film again. Then you got practice. Then guys are getting extra shots up. Then you're doing the film from the practice. Then you're putting everything together and having, you know, 2 or 3 meetings within that, depending on what you're in charge of and what Coach Beard and what Coach Berg and what Coach Adams and what they're wanting you to help them with. And you're involving your hands in so much, which is awesome, because you're learning, you know, I had to learn the video side of it as an older coach at that point. I would say older. I mean, I wasn't 27, you know, so I had guys around me that had been doing all this computer stuff. I hadn't been doing that. So I had to learn that on the go and figure out all the editing part. And then just the bits and pieces of being in every meeting, whether it's compliance, whether it's, you know, parents coming in and we're talking to new athletes, all the way trickling down there. It's a full day. It's exhausting. When I say coaches slept in their office, they slept in their office. I mean, these guys had families. I didn't have a family. I don't have a family. So I was fortunate, and some of us are fortunate enough. Like I don't know how they kept their family. I'm gonna just be honest with you. It's nuts. But there's a reason, you know, if you want to, you know, not, you know, cry on their shoulder too much. I mean, there's a reason why they make hundreds of thousands of dollars too. I mean, that could be one of the reasons, you know. So they put a lot of time in. And it shows when you win. Obviously, you know, they were in the national championship the year before I got there. COVID hit. We won, I think, 19 games. We beat Louisville, was #1 in the country that year. Had some good wins, had some bad losses. But we were edged out to be a tournament team if COVID wouldn't have happened, you know, at least make the tournament. It wasn't as much like that at Southern. There was bits and pieces that Coach Berg took, we took with us, which a lot of it was Texas Tech. But you know, the manpower and the money was different. So we couldn't do all those things, even though, you know, it could be like an 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 type of job, depending on games and stuff like that, just to kind of put an hour perspective into it. You know, it was good because a lot of it was the same our first 3 years there, you know, especially first 2, and then we kind of adapted some things into year 3. So it was an easy transition as far as a lot of us came from Tech. And even through those years, he hired more guys that were at Tech, you know, so we had a lot of ties that made that part easy. And then you transition now to Hayes, and Coach Johnson hasn't changed a lot in 25 years, which is awesome. Runs a lot of the same stuff, tweaked a couple things. But really, he's a simplistic guy when it comes to basketball. He doesn't want to make things hard. You know, he's about working hard. He's about putting guys in the right position. And, you know, that shows through workouts, which we haven't started yet, but I can already tell they're going to be very similar to even when I was here as far as their structure and how they're going. And he's going to get everything he can out of you in that time, and then he's going to let you have a life. Like, if you want to come back in and put more time in, great. But it's not like Texas Tech and some of these other ones where it's required, but it's not required. You know, I mean, guys are going to go in there because I mean, they're going to try to play the NBA. They're trying to be a lottery pick too. There's different variables. We're not to say guys at this level at Division II aren't trying to do that, but the reality of probably where they're at and what they're trying to do is a little bit different. And they're still going to work their tail off and be the best they can be. But at the end of the day, they're students and they're doing some other things. They may have a job, where at Tech you don't have a job, so it's a lot of different variables, but it's a little bit different. It's a full circle, I'll tell you that. I started here and I'm all the way back through some different working environments that were long hours, and you're looking around, scratching your head, wondering what you're doing there sometimes, but then you're doing some other part of work, and then I come back here and I'm almost trying to find stuff to do, So kind of been a big full circle for me.
Yeah. So we were talking about before, like go through your whole story. You said you wanted to talk about it, your whole story about the non-renewal from Southern and everything, how that all went down.
Yeah, not a fun deal. And I think anybody that's ever been part of a it was called a non-renewal, so it wasn't a fire, but I mean, we'll say what it is, a firing, whether it's any type of job, it's never good. I never thought for me, I never thought I'd be a part of that. It's just what I thought when I got into coaching. I was like, oh, there's no way I'd ever be a part of, myself being fired or being a part of a staff to be fired. That is something I never thought of. When reality, when you're in this business long enough, you're probably going to be a part of it. It's just how it goes, unfortunately. Especially when you get to the upper levels when there's more money and everything involved. So, for us, we were only there 3 years. I felt pretty bad, like a lot of our staff did for Coach Berg. He got the job in COVID. So then we had COVID. The whole world's trying to figure out what we're trying to do. We get through that year. We go to year 2, which is still kind of COVID for all the rest of the world. Then you go to year 3, and that was our best year. We ended up 500. I think we were 17. Finished higher in the league than what we were supposed to. Got to the quarterfinals, I think, of the conference tournament before we lost. So I had a really decent year, and then, it just came out that Monday after we got back from that weekend that he was, potentially going to be let go. And so then the talking starts happening. And I think the biggest thing for me, which I can say now, is, we had a staff of about 8 or 9 guys, which was a decent size for Georgia Southern. All the way from head coach to the 3 assistants to, 3 staff members to a weights guy to a athletic trainer, and then a couple GAs. That shook out our entire staff. So once that happened to where people were finding out, oh boy, like we may not have a job, that's where it turned completely crazy to me, is probably the best way to put it, because it almost turned everybody, and I won't say everybody, but a lot of them, it turns into a selfish game because you're fending for yourself. You have a family. Some of these guys are thinking, what am we going to do? A guy like me who's like, I've never been a part of this. What am I supposed to do? Like, so I'm trying to look for jobs, trying to, still talk to administration. And there's all these things going on. And it turns people really selfish, which I'd seen it in the business, but to see it when it's right in front of you and like something like that happened, it was totally different for me. So pretty eye-opening. Not something I want to experience again, and knock on wood, hopefully I don't. But it just opens your eyes to how short, your time period could be maybe in anything. So, as far as taking advantage of stuff and situations, but then, how quickly, obviously, it can turn around and you can end up somewhere else too.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's the one thing that I'm glad I'm in the high school side, because it's just like nowadays, nobody wants to coach at the high school level. So it's just kind of like kind of in it till you don't want to be, unless you just do a really terrible job. So it's pretty nice. So I don't have to go through that.
Yeah, I would never have to. I would never wish that on anybody.
Yeah, yeah. So going into your recruiting thing, like I talked to you, I wanted to talk to you the most about recruiting. So no matter where you've been at, your must-haves, what are you looking at in a kid? Not maybe necessarily the player, but the person that you're trying to recruit.
It's a great question. And I think through my years, I've always never said what I really value in a recruit. I've never said it first. I've always said other things which I look at as a coach since I've been a coach. But the first thing that comes to mind is character, and then how hard they work. And that can be looked at in a lot of different ways. Multi-sport kid to, just a basketball kid, to the academic side of it. And I was, I guess if you call it fortunate enough or lucky enough that it took me, and I still didn't get it all the way right, but it literally took 3 years of me being a head coach before I started evaluating my recruiting and then our assistants, our staff recruiting. And we were getting good enough players, to probably win more games than we were winning in those first 3 years, but it wasn't working out. So we just sat down and literally hashed it out, me, Egan, and Kevin Jolly. And I said exactly what I wanted. I wanted a kid that, is going to work his tail off. I don't care how good he is, at this point. Obviously, talent is, if you can get talent with hardworking in it, then you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to be really good. But you don't always get that. But that was one of my focal points of getting kids that work their tail off, doesn't matter where they're from. And then the character part, having to, I'm still a coach that recruits guys that, I wouldn't say all of them. I mean, definitely in my past, I've taken, some guys that have some question marks in their character. And more so I did that personally because I thought I could help them. I mean, that was it. Like, I thought really, okay, we can put them in a system. We can put them around us, around a group, and I've got burnt quite a bit on that. I mean, and I still maybe will to this day, and that's just part of maybe, the person I am a little bit, and then the coach that I want to be, with around these guys. So it hurts me a little bit, but those are two things, without getting too crazy in what you asked me, that I for sure look at all the time. I'm looking at them right now. I'm looking at 24 kids and 25 kids for Fort Hays and trying to pinpoint that because I know exactly what Coach Johnson wants. It's easy for me. So I can overlook some other things and go right to the kid and be like, okay, yeah, you'll work for this. You may not be as talented as this other kid from, Lathe East or from, Hoxie or wherever that it may be, but we can use these 2 or 3 tools, and I know you can play here because of that.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of kids kind of struggle on. And it was something, me and Xavier talked about too, is like the D1 or bust and all these things of these guys just like settling for these levels and then, getting mad or upset when they see, we talked about before, like you see a guard that's 5'8" guard or 5'8" or 5'9" guard that's averaging 30, but then you got a 6'2" guard that's averaging 15 and he's got 30 Division I offers and doing this and doing that. And it's like, well, you're these coaches in your profession, like, you're looking for other characteristics other than points and things like that. You're looking for, what skill sets they have as far as body wise. You're not, I mean, I know when I got to Southwestern, I had never had my wingspan, checked ever before and found out I was 6'5" with a 6'1" wingspan. Like, don't have long arms. Like, that's something that if I went to a higher level, I probably would have disqualified me from coaching or playing somewhere. So that's something that I think kids got to kind of understand is it's not always about the numbers. It really isn't. I think there's one kid, for example, like that I played against, he was at Hutch, Keanu Pinder from Hutch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Keanu Pinder, probably averaged 6-7 points a game, probably 6-7 rebounds a game at Hutch, and then goes to Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And then goes there and is a, key piece of they're really, they had a really good team at that point. It's like that kid, he fit their system and what they needed to do. It didn't matter how many points he scored, it didn't matter how many rebounds he really had. He just fit the system because of his skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right too. I think on a lot of those points, especially as a coach too, at the collegiate level, I mean, you got a kid that's 6'8", and let's even say you got a kid that's 6'5". So, they're roughly both tall, obviously, in the basketball world. But, they're both going to play the forward spot. As a coach, I mean, obviously the height's intriguing. You're going to want bigger. You're going to want size. If they both play the same, they both work their tail off. But the 6'8" kid, let's say, has a little bit less of a motor than the 6'5" kid. Has a little bit less, the coaching aspect part of it. most coaches are going to still take the 6'8" kid. I mean, he's got the gift of talent as far as the height part, and he's got most of the motor part. And, so a lot of guys at any level are going to take that because they think they can continue to develop. And that, if you want to say shorter guy in all, positions, sometimes gets overlooked, or maybe it was something about athletically gets overlooked. One of the good things about those situations, I always say, because I was the same as you. I'm a Kansas kid. I was 6'1". You're taller than me. I mean,
Yeah.
we're from an area where not you don't get looked at a whole lot. I'm just being honest with you, especially in Northwest Kansas or even Southwest Kansas or anywhere where there's not a population on the eastern part of Kansas.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something very special, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're averaging 25 a game sometimes. You may not even be able to play at Fort Hays at a Division
Mhm.
two. Like, it may not even get looked at. And it's not because you're probably not good enough, but like, this is kind of where I was as a player and kind of where I developed as a coach. Like, number one, you need to go where you're wanted. That you need to go where you wanted. That may be the NAI level, and you may not be okay with that, but those people want you, or the Division two people, they want you. So that holds a lot of weight to you playing eventually, to you playing a lot, to whatever the case may be, being a part of that team. Um, that's not saying, which we all have in our heart and our blood, that if you have a urge of Division one, but you're not getting looked at, but you can somehow make it, by all means, I would tell you to do it right away
Yeah.
because that's a dream come true. But the only difference in that part is you got to have a whole lot of heart, and you got to have a big stomach as far as being able to be like, well, this is year 2 or 3, and I've been laying everything out on the line, and I'm not getting a sniff of anything. You made that decision, but there's a reason why you're there. So I I have a big heart for both sides of those. But the biggest part is, not giving up like we all do when we're in those situations or we have kids like that. And keep reaching for what you're going for. I mean, nowadays, I think it's probably better for the kid with the transfer portal, with the
Yeah.
rules that have changed. I mean, you go produce at an NAI level, at a D2 level. Heck, those guys are getting signed Division One, D2 all over the place now. It didn't used to be like that. The
Yeah.
rules were different. So I'd say even more so now, you're lucky. Like, kids are lucky. Like,
Hmm.
hey, let's scholarship at a lower level. Let's work our tail off. Let's average 25 there, and then be like, dang, you guys passed me up. Okay, well, I'll give you a shot. I mean, so there's those things that I think are advantageous for the athlete nowadays. For maybe
Yeah.
somebody who's overlooked because they're from a smaller area, somebody that's overlooked because they're less athletic or 2 inches shorter, but is still good enough to play collegiately.
Yeah. I think, Jalen Scott from Bethel, was a 4-year player at Bethel. Um, I think he was an All-American, all kinds of stuff. He stayed true and he leaves and goes to college at Charleston this year and is a starter for him. And they go and win, go to the NCAA tournament. And they're one of the, Cinderella picks for everybody to go through, ranked in the top 25, all that. And, he was a kid that, came from, I think he was from like the Dallas Fort Worth area or Houston area, something like that. Came from a bigger area, but played on a really good high school team. Didn't get a lot of burn, didn't get a lot of this, and he comes up to swallows the pill and says, hey, I got an opportunity to play at the NAIA level, and then becomes an All-American, gets to go to, College of Charleston. And I think he was an all-league player there too. So, I think, like, to your point, like the transfer portal, some of those kids are getting those opportunities. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a different ball game. There's a whole different side of that ball game too that's opened
yeah.
up. But I think there's a lot of advantages for guys, girls, that are in those situations that maybe thought they got passed up or didn't get the recruitment they wanted to, or whatever the case is. If you're doing what you're supposed to, it's going to show. And nowadays, you're able to bounce around. I mean, to whereas maybe you would have been stuck there, 5 years
Yeah.
ago. Like, hey, you chose it, so now let's go ahead and you laid your bed. So go ahead, let's lay in it. But you have different opportunities now, and not to say that school you're at anyways, where you're supposed to be. Obviously you're producing or doing whatever you're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
it's a good. It's taken a little bit to get used to collegiate on the collegiate side of it. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of everything yet. I'm a fan of some things that have changed in the past, couple of years. But obviously, with time, it'll hopefully level out a little bit. I hope so.
Yeah. I'm hopefully being at the D2 level, it'll be a little bit less cutthroat, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it definitely is. trying to find a way to navigate through all that still is interesting to me. Being back here now during it, but it's definitely a little bit less money. I don't have to worry about all that. And as far as the kid goes, whichever kid you're getting out of the portal, I mean, it seems like it's a little bit easier when it comes to that, as far as what you're trying to grab, I guess. So
Yeah, for sure. So, what have been the biggest like differences recruiting for personnel between being at Colby, going to Tech, going to Georgia, or going to Southern, now coming back to Hayes? I mean, what's been that? Let's start like from starting at Colby to going to Tech. Like, what was the difference for you?
well, the recruiting part, obviously the athlete was the biggest difference, I would say. Because we had good players at Colby, that played Division I. Some of them that could have probably, sniffed the high major level if they had the opportunity to, as far as their athleticism and stuff like that. But when you get to that, from Colby jump to Texas Tech, where you're in the Big 12 and you're a Power Five, and I mean, you're only virtually dealing with high caliber athletes. It doesn't matter if it's a high school 5-star, top 100 kid in the country, to a kid from Italy, or a kid from I don't know, Russia, that we had. Even our walk-ons would have been Division I scholarship athletes at other schools, but they chose to walk on at Texas Tech. So you have so many different athletes, which makes it a lot of fun, because you're not really you're not coaching the athlete part. You're still getting them bigger, faster, stronger within our program and stuff like that. But they're already maybe 5 or 6 notches better than guys at Colby.
Yeah.
So you're bumping up from 5 or 6 to 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it's like, oh wow, like these guys just, there's a reason why they look chiseled and they're all over the place. Um, so that was definitely interesting to me. Just that jump, when making the jump from Tech to Southern, was more of the familiarity of me and Colby. The mid-major level of Division I, especially the Sun Belt, I felt more at home as far as being a JUCO guy, a JUCO coach. A lot of our guys we probably had, in the 3 years. I mean, I probably should have had this number, but over 10 JUCO guys in 3 years. So we recruited a lot of junior college guys, sprinkled in our high school guys. Then obviously the portal stuff hits, we were able to sprinkle in transfers and stuff like that. Um, so that was a little bit more, I don't want to say comfortable, because that's probably not the right word. But it just seemed like it was easier for me to say, hey, there's this kid at Hutch, there's this kid at Colby, there's this kid, at South Georgia, that we need to look at and visualize him completely playing in this conference, opposed to at Tech. Well, I got to reach for all my networking. I got to be more part of networking. I got to get in with these guys, because you're dealing with, not just the athlete, you're dealing with his AAU, his, guy that maybe was been with his family for 25 years. So there's a whole big pool of people when you're dealing with those high major guys that you have to be incorporated with. Whereas you get back down to the mid-major level, and then obviously Fort Hayes, you can really pick and choose and see it a little differently, and it's not maybe as hard. I guess maybe that's a way to put it too, because there's a vast amount of kids, and then you can be really picky within those kids, whether they're junior college or obviously high school or transfers, to where you can say, okay, they're going to play at Fort Hayes, they're going to play at Georgia Southern, based off of the type of player they are.
Yeah. Oh gosh, sorry. Um, yeah, I think that's like the biggest difference. Well, now I think with the portal too, it's kind of helping close the gap between like mid-major, high major, as far as like athletes. You have those kids that maybe go to a Tech that don't pan out, and now they're going down, and that's why you're seeing some of these mid-major schools, like Santa Clara, seeing what they're doing now. And there's always, a St. Mary's is always gets one or two good portal guys. I think their best player this year was a transfer 4-year player from Cincinnati. So yeah, so I think that's what's kind of changed, is now it's letting some of those kids that get to elevate, and it's letting some of those kids that, yeah, they were the great athlete, but now they can go down to the lower levels and be the type of player they were expected to be, almost, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And we're probably leaving a small bit out too, because we're still in the COVID era of COVID kids. So,
yeah,
we we have 2 years left, and then it's done. This is the last major year of, guys that got an extra year. So the whole NCAA, it doesn't matter where you're at, is older. Like,
Yeah.
there's guys 23, 24, 25 playing still, maybe even 26 in some cases, which is crazy to say against 18-year-old kids, got 8 years on them.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. And I think we have a kid on Fort Hays actually that he has 2 years left of a COVID, which is crazy because this technically should be the last year, but he redshirted during the COVID part. So he had an extra additional one. So last year, technically, if guys redshirted around the country, would be the last year that they had any type of extra year for COVID. So once that kind of goes all the way through, I think that part will normalize as far as what we were used to before, as far as the age, 18 to 22, or, that type of deal
Yeah.
where it's okay, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, it just really is. And that's why the portal's so huge, even more so these last 2 to 3, years. And obviously this year too, adding into it. Because everybody's trying to stay older, everybody's trying to get more mature and
Yep.
have much experience so you can make the run when you're supposed to make the run. That's the kind of the formula, Kentucky can get all the freshmen and they still struggle, but those are 5-star freshmen. Not
Yeah.
everybody in the country try to go get all a bunch of freshmen and try to win 20 to 30 games. It just doesn't happen like that because you need to be older.
Yep, for sure. So, what are some of your craziest or most unpleasant recruiting stories that you ever had to deal with?
Oh man, I don't even know how much of this I should open up with you.
I know one you told me one day when we were lifting at Colby, and that was it was pretty funny, but it's
Yeah.
probably not PG.
What's that? Which one?
I said it's probably not PG. It involved
Oh,
you in Cali on a beach.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Right, right about that.
Yeah.
I've got back into the recruiting part more so now. The last 4 years, I've been more phone recruiting and stuff like that. So I really haven't had some of those stories, which is probably, maybe good for what I'm about ready to tell you. But now I got back into the actual on the road recruiting. So some of these are probably still the same, as far as past stories and everything like that. But and I think I probably told you this one, but one of the ones that came to my mind right away was when I believe it was my second year at Colby as an assistant. So still trying to get my bearings as far as recruiting goes and trying to get my networking going and branching out, talking to Dustin, to who I'm supposed to talk to, so just still learning that at a young age. And I go down, and a buddy of mine who I played with at Hutch has a prep school that was from North Carolina, but they navigated their way over to Oklahoma City. And so they were called Raleigh's Finest, took the Raleigh name from North Carolina and then brought it over here. And so he's like, hey, come down. We got 2 teams, I want you to check it out. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll drive anywhere. Like, just drive all over the place and try to look for kids. So I go down there, and they were playing only prep schools. And I don't know where I'm walking into because I just have the address. So just to kind of give you the landscape here, I pull into a church parking lot, and I'm looking at my navigation. And I'm like, this can't be right. Like, it's literally a huge chapel. And so I call Mike, and I'm like, hey, Mike, like, I'm in a church parking lot. Is this correct, man? Like, the game's supposed to start in 10 minutes. He's like, oh, yeah. There's a gym inside the church. And I just chuckled. I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So I walk in there. Raleigh's Finest is playing, and they're playing against God's Academy, who is a prevalent prep school in Texas, and had probably two probably high major kids on that team, and then probably 2 or 3 other like just Division I guys. So I was like, oh wow, this is awesome! Like, I'm getting to watch this in a church. And so literally, I'm down there. They have a rope kind of in a section of probably 10 by 10. I'm the only coach there. And I'm like looking around like, this can't be right. Like, why am I the only coach here? And so anyway, I'm loving it. I'm eating it up, and the game's going on about 2 minutes in, and these 2 players start just jawing. And these officials seem like they were from like 5th grade or max junior high officials. They were not very high tech on the officiating part of it, just trying to get paid. And so these two were John, and it's on my half of where I was sitting, but on the opposite side of the court. And the Raleigh's kid just had enough, shoved the ball right in this guy's chest, and it was on after that. Full-fledged brawl. Benches cleared, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like 24 to 26. I'm just holding on to my chair. I'm just like looking around because there's now 20 dudes just throwing fists, and it was all over the court. The officials couldn't do anything. So I had one of this big Bohemian guy was from Raleigh's team, was 6'8". He was taking on two of the Gods Academy guys, and this is out of a WWF book, like WWF. He had went and hit one guy in the face, and when he hit him in the face, there was a metal trash can like right over here, and he hit him. The other guy was behind him about 5 yards coming at him. He grabs the metal trash can and spun and sees him, and then hits him in the face with the metal trash can, and then dumps the trash on him. And I'm just, at this point, Cole, I'm standing up because it's coming towards me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on the news. I'm going to have to defend myself.
Yeah.
And nobody can stop it. There's no cops. There's nothing. So to top this off, to kind of speed this story up, it's going on for a good 4 or 5 minutes. And out from the door comes the Reverend. And he is yelling bloody murder. Like, he's like, stop. Like, what are we doing? Like, and nobody is stopping. So he tries to break up a fight. Well, as he's breaking up a fight, he just get cold cocks right in the face and knocked to the ground. And at that point, I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to be good. So finally, they were able to break it up, and obviously the game was forfeited. There was no more games. So I drove, however long that is, 6-7 hours from Colby all the way to Oklahoma City to watch 2 minutes of a game to then tell Dustin, hey, we're probably not going to sign or recruit any of these guys.
Yeah.
That was young into my career, and I was like, oh man, if this is what I'm getting into, I'm gonna have a book of stories. So it was a pretty good one, even though it didn't pan out to any recruits.
Yeah, I had a buddy of mine who coached out in he coached like junior college out in in California. So he was out like, the whole he was in NorCal. And he told me he went to go recruit this kid. And he shows up. It was a home visit. So he's in the home, everything. Mom makes supper. He eats everything, leaves. He ends up getting food poisoning. And it was an hour and a half drive from his hotel to their house. He got food poisoning. And so he told me, he's like, I'm never eating anybody else's food ever again. I said, did you sign that kid? He goes, no. He's like, he made some crazy off the wall comment, but he's like, no, I'm not doing it. So I'm like, oh man, all right, if I ever get into it, I'm not eating. I don't care how good your mama's cooking is, because he's like, man, it was a clean house, like big, beautiful house, like all this stuff. It was a farm, like he was a big farm kid. He was like 6'8", 6'9" kid. And he's like, it was beautiful, but he's like, I got food poisoning from it. He's like, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, that'd be a rough one. That'd be a rough drive back. Even I couldn't imagine. Jeez.
Yeah, I think he said he ended up stopping like 5-6 times on the side of the highway, having to do his business. So
I bet.
I was like, did you have any like clothes left? Like, do you have anything to take, make sure you can wipe your behind with? And he's like, I had a pack of those dude wipes or whatever in his car, or that he'd left in there from something. And I was like, lucky man.
Yeah, you're real lucky. You're carrying around dude wipes. You're a different man anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So he's got the big money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess last couple questions. Advice to athletes, young athletes that are wanting to get recruited, no matter the level. What's the big advice that you can give them to keep their nose out of trouble, whatever they need to do?
Yeah. The biggest thing is obviously staying true to who you are. If it's something you want to do, you're going to have to put in time and effort. Unless you're fortunate enough to just, be gifted with some certain talents to where you don't have to work as hard as the next guy. You got to put work in. And I think anybody would probably tell you that around the country. And that's kind of where you separate yourself. And just that separation right there is not even what it takes to even make the big jump. That's just the start. Because then you got to really isolate your hard work and then push even harder than, the guy that's 100 miles away, and then there's another guy 1,000 miles away, so if you're wanting to do that, regardless if it's just past high school to the collegiate level to eventually being a professional, you got to put your work in. And it doesn't matter where you're at. It really doesn't. It doesn't matter if you're in, northwestern Kansas, southwestern Kansas, to, a school out in Cali, or even maybe in North Carolina. If you're trying to reach a certain, place, a certain goal, it's gonna go back to putting your work in, kind of like I'm saying. So, as far as some other things that have changed since I've, been in high school, probably even maybe even a little bit since you've been in high school, is if you can be, you know, get out of your shell is another way to, put it too, I guess. So, I mean, it's great to do, stuff around your town, do your camps, do your, maybe drive 100 miles and do a summer league or something like that. Those things are great and they need to be done. But if you're really trying to get your name out there, you need to go do an elite camp at Auburn. You need to go, go somewhere where maybe it's a dream for you to play, but go to that elite camp. Get involved in a good AAU program that doesn't have to travel all summer, but maybe hits 4 tournaments or 3 tournaments, that are bigger, where you can see other players. You can play against other players. That's one thing I didn't have enough of. Which I wish I did, because it's only going to help you. It helps to fail. I mean, it's okay to fail. That's the biggest thing. It's okay to fail, because then you really figure out where you're at. You really figure out how bad you want to do whatever it is you're doing when you failed it, and you try not to fail again. And that's what makes the best competitors, whether it's Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, I mean, any guy that played any other sport. That's what makes them good. They did fail and they figured it out, and they tried not to fail ever again. And if they did, they bounced back and they did it again even harder. So get out of that shell, get out a little bit. It doesn't matter where it's at, as long as it's somewhere bigger. And that's only going to help your name recruiting wise too. I mean, because people remember that. I'll tell you that right now. They'll remember right away. Doesn't matter if you were the 50th best kid in that camp, or maybe AAU event or whatever. All us coaches are keeping lists, and we're keeping them. It doesn't matter if you're 5th on that list, 1st on that list, 25th on the list. You're on the list. The hardest thing is getting on the list. And then once you're on the list, what are you going to do to help yourself, or what is that coach gonna, be like, wait a minute, I wrote this thing down. Maybe let's go back and watch him in Kansas. Let's just let me catch one game. And then that's all it takes, to be honest with you. And then the dreams come true. So that's what I would tell anybody. Just keep working and keep doing what you're doing, and then try to find a way to put the right people around you and do it as hard as you can if it's something you want to do, and make a career out of it.
Yeah, I think that's something, trying to get people like around here. And then even when I was in high school is, my parents got questioned a whole lot about like the things that I did. I wasn't around in the summers for summer weights for football and things like that. They were like, well, why isn't he here? My parents were like, well, he needs to go play. He's got to go play summer ball. He's got to go do this. He's got to do that. And they're like, well, that's crazy. Like, well, how much does that cost you? And my parents just tell them the cost. Like it cost us probably, $5,000-6,000 a summer between travel and pay and hotels and all this other stuff. She's like, it costs a lot. And they're like, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, do you want your kid to, if your kid has a dream in doing this, like, is that money is just a dollar amount.
Yeah.
And, now like being here, with my kids, like this was the first summer I had a kid. I took 3-4 kids to WKE tryouts, Western Kansas, with Coach Eddie, Coach O'Neill from Hutchinson, all them. So I took 3-4 kids out there for them to, go try out. And it like I'm like coming back and telling these kids like, hey, we whether you're in 1st grade or 5th grade, because you can play middle school basketball here at 6th grade. So you get 3 years in middle school. But, we tell them like, you're not going to get any better just playing these small, like playing the same kids all the time. And that's where we made the big jump, is like in the summers, we don't go play in a summer league. Like this year we did, but we still did our other stuff. We don't go play in a summer league like in Pratt with just nothing but our league schools. Like we don't do that. What we do is we fundraise. We go to MOI, we fundraise and do donations, all these crazy things to go to play in MYB tournaments. We go to the 1A, 2A tournament, and we get to play schools that we'd never played before. We've gone to the MAYB kickoff. We've gone out to Hayes 2 summers in a row. We've gone to, we've done all this, and we never. I think we've only ran into playing teams that we play every year, maybe once or twice. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, from my first year to my second year, the kids are just like, I just don't get how we got so much better. Like, it doesn't feel. And I'm like, no, it's because you guys, we did something all summer. We went and played better kids. Josh got my big kid that was 6'6" and a great shot blocker. He got so much better because all summer he's banging around with 6'8" dudes from Arkansas and Kansas City and Oklahoma City and Lincoln and Wichita and all that. Like, that's how you get better. We
Mm-hmm.
may have got our butt kicked, guys, but we got better when we come down to our level, then we're good. And so
Yeah.
trying to get the parents on board with that here is like, hey, you got to get these kids out here and let them go play other competition. And if your kid wants to go out and play and wants to make a dream of this, they have to do those things.
Yeah.
So
Exactly right. Yeah, you're doing it right. I would say you're doing it exactly right. It's the best thing for them. Sometimes it's not always easy,
no,
but at the same time, within the restriction of whatever your money is to whatever you can do,
yeah,
I think it helps, man. I think that's the biggest thing. And let's face it, we're in a world of social media now. We're in a world of all these other things that, I mean, heck, I could get a job through social media as a
yeah,
coach, which is for me to say because of my followers or because of whatever my influence.
yeah,
But that's what we are. That's what the kids are used to. So so unfortunately, that all helps if you get them out too. I mean, that's just how it all works, like
yeah,
that. So if you can be fortunate enough, if you don't have money and it's just a tough area, I mean, I just tell you to find a way. I mean, there's always a way. It may not be the easiest way, even if it's only one time you can do it. I mean,
yeah,
at least you're touching a part of the game or a part of something you're wanting to do that one time, even if it's one time over the summer, and then you're getting back to what you're doing in your hometown or wherever it is. So
yeah. All right, so this is my last question. It's our last little segment. So we call it Goat Talk. And I'm going to do with you is I'm going to make you do the 5 best players that you've ever got to coach. That's your whole time coaching, from being a GA at Fort Hays to everything. So 5 best players, and I know you got to coach some really, really good guys. I'm not one of those guys, but really, really good guys.
well, let me start out by saying um, I cherish you. I cherish a lot. I mean, every guy that I coached up to this point. Like, I've been fortunate to. I've had some guys that, I mean, I've still to this day scratched my head and wondered, okay, why did I even bring you along? Like, it didn't
Uh-huh.
even. There's some bad tension, blood, whatever the case is. But on more so on another hand, I've coached a lot of good dudes. I've coached a lot of good dudes that are fathers that have, great jobs that make way more money than I'll ever make. Just different attributes that it's so good to. That's one of the things that I like about coaching that I didn't know I would like as far as the past life. As far as, I mean, moving on past the life that we were in,
Mhm.
I guess that's the way to put it. So when I can do stuff like this, I can talk to an ex-player. I can talk to a guy now that we can talk coaching philosophy. When I
Yeah.
can talk to Ed, when I stay close to Gabriel Jimpy, when I talk to Hassan, Achmed, you have all these names that come and those are the ones that touch you. Not
Yeah.
everybody you can talk to. And it's not about that. I understand that because life goes on too. But that really puts it in perspective as a coach. I don't know if every coach is like that. I know it hits a nerve with me where I'm like, wow, okay, well, whether it was one thing that stuck with you or nothing that stuck with whoever, I mean, it was something that we can still have a conversation, which is awesome. It's completely awesome. That's probably me getting older, me understanding stuff, but it's great.
Yeah.
So to lead into the 5 best players, that's tough, man.
Yeah.
I would have to think about that, but I will say a name that comes to my mind right away that is in my top 5 is Carson Conrady from Spearville, Kansas.
Yeah.
Um, he by far, I talked to him last week. He's another guy I talked to quite a bit. You know, he was not the most wowing guy, but man, could he play a ball, man. He's one of those athletes who he was good at almost everything he did. So it was fortunate. He played at Colby, had a great career at Colby, then obviously went on to Fort Hays State, had a great career at Fort Hays State. Um, so Carson was in that realm. I would say, as far as overall athletes, and somebody I put in my top 5 was Jeremiah Ingram.
Yes.
That my first couple years at Colby. I was fortunate enough, Dustin and I, but it was mainly Dustin, got that done before he decided to step down. And that was one of my first guys I got to coach as a head coach, which I wish I could go back because I would have used him so differently too. Like I was just young and I was learning with him, and I wish I could give him some of my knowledge now too. But he ended up being a really good player. Obviously moving on from there. So Carson, Jeremiah, I'm going to try to hopefully hit not all Colby guys because I feel like I'm being a little biased on that.
Yeah.
But I'll transition over to Davide Moretti at Texas Tech. So he was on that national championship run team, played with them the year before, obviously, and I think they made an Elite Eight run. And then I was able to be a part of that coaching tree when I went down to Texas Tech. He was actually my guy I was in charge of, which was awesome. So as much as maybe people thought, even being a coach, like he learned from me, I probably learned more from him. And I was an older coach, going down there, being his guy, put him through drills. But just the way he did things made me look at things differently as a pro. And he's still a pro over in Italy right now. Really good player. And then I would say Jamias Ramsey was also there. He was a freshman at Texas Tech, ended up getting drafted by the Sacramento Kings in the second round, I think, after his freshman year. He was just a phenomenal athlete. I've never probably seen a guy that young that could step into obviously a high major level and start as a freshman, in the Big 12 and then do what he did. I mean, he had 40 at the Bahamas, one of our Bahamas games, like one of his first two games. It was just like, wow, like this kid's pretty darn good. And then to narrow out the five, man, my top five. Geez, that's tough.
I can give you a couple. You can have a couple honorable mentions too.
An honorable mention. Yeah. I'll only do one honorable mention. But to put in my top five, I'm going to put Hassan Ati in there.
Yeah.
I think that was just a rare for me as a coach. And even I think he could have played at a high major school. He could play at Texas Tech, to be honest with you. He just so chose with the recruiting that we did that it fell really good with him at Hartford. But he was just a specimen. Yeah. And obviously he was, he wasn't older, but I mean, we always joked about how old he was, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was on that borderline of, 21 to 22 in the JUCO world, to where he got in at the right time and then was able to play his college career from there. So just he's a 6'10" defensive tackle, and just what he was able to do with the ball, it almost was like, geez, dude, It's like the pros do, the MJs and everybody where they can it looks like a softball in their hands and they're just carrying it. So, he was a really good one, and to watch grow in 2 years and even change in 2 years, which was awesome as far as the style of basketball. And then the last one, I'll just throw in a Georgia Southern guy. His name is Zach Bryant. He played for us our first year. He's now playing professionally. He just played in, I think, is it the TBD tournament? Is that?
Yeah, TBT. Yeah.
Yeah, he played in that on a team. So he's still playing professionally. He's over in Germany a lot and some other countries, but just a specimen, kind of like a Jamias Ramsey that we had at Georgia Southern. Didn't fit into why you would be there being that athletic. I'd say that he could have played at Texas Tech too. So we were fortunate to be able to coach him our first year there in the transition during COVID, because he was a super athlete. So
yeah, I still remember it was one of my first practices my freshman year, and we were working on double downs. Working butt to the baseline, coming down, blah blah blah, all this stuff. And I got to go against Hassan. So we throw it into Hassan. I go down. I go to double down. I put two hands on the ball. And for the people listening, this is how strong this man was. I was 6'4", 190 pounds, right? I got two hands on the ball. He picks me up off the ground with the ball, jumps. I'm still holding onto the ball, and dunks the ball, and my hand is still on the ball. I remember I got out of practice. I called Mikey, and I was like, dude, I don't know if I can play. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, I got dunked. And he's like, oh, you got dunked on? You've been dunked on before? I'm like, no, I got dunked. Literally, I got picked up off the ground and dunked today.
Yeah.
Like, who? And I said, Hassan. He goes, "Is that the big Egyptian kid?" I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's ridiculous." He's like, "He's just a freak. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." But and you won't meet a better person than Hassan. I mean, he's just an amazing person.
Yeah, you
Like
hit that. Yeah.
he was the only one that out of all of us that could ever control Ahmed. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. Being as big as he was, I mean, he could put him
Yeah,
right in the but thank goodness he did, because otherwise I probably would have a few more gray hairs, maybe no hair, and maybe
yeah.
not even lost my job a couple times too. So yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard about this story. It was after basketball season was done my freshman year, and we were in Dane and Layton's dorm, and oh man, Ahmed and Justice Cuthbertson, they start going at it. And Ahmed's like ready to fight, just absolutely ready to fight. Well, Hassan had been, I think he'd been working out or something. He was in the weight room. He comes and I'm standing outside. I'm like, Hassan, you got to grab him, dude. Like we can't hold on to him, you know? He just walks in and, Ahmed's 7'2", probably 260, just picks
Yep.
up Ahmed, puts him on his shoulder and just starts walking out. And Ahmed didn't even fight him or nothing, but he's still sitting there on Hassan's shoulder arguing with Justice. And it was
Yeah.
one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was
Can't
just
even
so
imagine
funny.
picking up a 7-2. It looks like
Yeah,
it's unreal.
yeah,
Um,
it
and
was crazy.
that happens so many times. But the only other time, shorter story, obviously, was I remember we were in practice and I just had it and was done with Ahmed. And Ahmed just kept being Ahmed and kept talking, just didn't want to stop. And
Yep.
I remember looking, I turned around when I was probably getting ready to turn back around and say something just absolutely vulgar at
Yeah.
Ahmed, like the third time. And I see Hassan just walk over there on the baseline and grab his jersey underneath his throat and then
Oh yeah.
hold him off the ground.
Yeah.
Ahmed didn't say a word in the rest of practice. And I was, oh, okay. All right. Well, that was easy, you know? So,
Yeah.
they have a different type of love relationship, obviously, but at the same
Yeah.
time, um, yeah, those are both good dudes. But Hassan, yeah, he's a special dude. So
Yeah, for sure. So, well, coach, I mean, uh, always appreciative of everything you did for me. You gave me an opportunity and I wouldn't be in this coaching thing if it wasn't for you. I had to make that phone. I called you before I called my parents when I made my decision um, and kept it real with me and I always appreciated that. And so there is none of my success without you. And so thank you for everything you did for me. And I hope you get back to the level that you want to be at, or if you're happy at Fort Hays, that's great. That you're just an hour away from me. So that's cool.
absolutely. Well, and like I told you, I appreciate you. Appreciate all past players and everything like that. And this is awesome that you're doing this. And I'm closer to you now and some other guys that I've been away from the last 4 years, so I can watch them if they're coaches or see
Yeah.
their fans or stuff like that. So like you said though, without you or any of the athletes, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And there was a point in my career when I was in your position where you called me to where I was in that same position. So, people helped me along the way and helped me kind of decipher, at least put stuff in front of me where I decided what I wanted to do at that point. So so that's the fun thing about coaching, man. It never stops, and
Yeah.
I can learn from you. I learned probably from you when you were a player and you didn't even know it, and now I can learn from you as a coach, and that's the best thing about it. It's a revolving thing outside of wherever we are in our career and our relationships. So,
Yeah, for
thank you
sure.
for doing this. This is awesome, man. I probably got long winded. I haven't talked this much since probably I was in Colby coaching you. I don't know. So getting you
Probably,
back
yeah.
to talking a lot, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, coach, like I said, I appreciate everything you did. And, hopefully I can make it up there a couple times this year and see you or hang out with you or shoot you a schedule, get you some of my stuff. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was going to say before we got off, I mean, team wise, you guys want to come up, we'll set something up, we'll get you to a game. If you want to come watch practice yourself or bring the team up and just watch,
for sure.
absolutely. Because Coach Johnson's done a good job with Kansas kids, and that'd be kind of cool for your guys. I mean, there's a lot of Kansas kids that contribute a ton here, which
Yeah.
is good to see. But at the end of the day, it's really good basketball too. So that's
Yeah.
another thing.
MIAA is crazy.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, you just let me know that door's always open, and then vice
Well, you
versa.
opened it, so I'll be texting you. You opened it,
Absolutely.
so I'll be texting you. So,
That'll work.
But, all right, Coach. I'll talk to you later.
All right, cool. We'll see you, bud.
See you later. Bye. And that does it for today's episode of the Crossover Chronicles podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and will continue to give us a listen. We also ask that you help in spreading this podcast by sharing our episodes on all social media platforms. And if you haven't already, please follow us on Twitter for release updates and interview announcements. If you're interested in being a guest in the future, or if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, you can message us on our Twitter. As always, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.